A very good day to all who are here to listen to our presentation today. The title of our presentation is a Systemic Functional Linguistic Investigation into the Mental Health Community, Articulating Personal Recovery for Collective Healing. My co-author for this paper is Dr. SFLIGG2021 and my name is Zao May. The current SFL study is a referential cohesion analysis on recovery-oriented narrative discourse in mental health memoirs written by medical practitioners. These memoirs come in the form of published documents known as books. In these memoirs, they are narratives surrounding mental health recovery, which was shared from the perspective of medical practitioners. These medical practitioners were recreating their patients' recovery experiences based on their personal knowledge while reflecting upon their clinical practice. For the purposes of the current study, the use of esophagus as cohesive ties in the constructions of the Ron discourse will be explored. 4 mental health memoirs written by medical practitioners were employed as the data sources. Now I'm going to briefly introduce each author. The first author, Erwin D. Yalom, is an emeritus professor of psychiatry who is also practicing as a psychiatrist. The second author, Nathan Fielder, is an award-winning writer who wrote about his professional insights from having served as a mental health nurse in psychiatric wards. The third author, Lori Golub, is a psychotherapist who shares her personal insight and also clinical observation of talk therapy. The fourth author, Linda Gass, is Emeritus Professor of Primary Care Psychiatry, who is also a consultant psychiatrist. 2 chapters were collected from each of the 4 memoirs through the selection procedure, which is based upon the personal recovery model. These chapters were treated as the recovery-oriented narrative discourse, making up the current data set. The personal recovery model is built around the following attributes, which are strength, hope, healing, value, and inclusion. The mental health memoirs, which are the object of investigation, contain the Ron discourse constituted of representational practices which can contribute to the shaping of narrative identities. According to Lewis, narrative identities are composed of plots explaining where we have been, where we are, and where we are going. They originate from very particular viewpoints. The personal recovery narrative in the Ron discourse can play a role in our self-constitution in which we first conceptualize our life as a story. The resultant self-narrative then influences who we think we can and should be, and by extension who we actually are. By examining the functions of reference devices in expressing at each stage in the discourse, the points of contact with what has gone before, the shaping of narrative identities can be unraveled. The stories we live by and metaphorically and literally tell ourselves and others pertaining to who we are can be treated as a form of self-narrative, which is sustained, sequential, integrated, and purposive upon which our identity is based, as Gideon suggests. That is to say, we develop our very own narrative identities based on the self-narrative which we endorse for ourselves. For our study in particular, we are interested to explore how the stories about personal recovery in the Ron discourse can possibly help to shape the reader's narrative identities. Our unit of analysis is the nominal group, more specifically, exophoric references. I'm going to explain more about exophoric references later. The aims of the study are to identify the exophoric references used as cohesive ties in the constructions of the Ron discourse in the mental health memoirs, and to explore the use of exophoric references for expressing personal recovery experiences as portrayed by the shaping of narrative identities. The theoretical framework of the current study is based upon the reference framework from Martin, 1992. Martin divides reference cohesion into three major kinds, namely homophora to do with reference to the context of culture, endophora to do with reference to the verbal context, the text itself, and exophora to do with reference to the non-verbal context outside the text itself. For endophora is further categorized into anaphora, pointing towards the preceding text, and exphora or cataphora, pointing towards the following text, either within the same nominal group or beyond the group. For the purposes of the current study, only exophora, which is reference to the non-verbal context, is looked upon. Exophora typically refers to either interactants like speaker, speaker plus others, and addressee of the speech events, or non-interactants which are within the field of perception shared by speaker and listener. Exophora, which appears as first mentioned quite commonly, can be set aside after its first mention, thereby spawning biasness in the reference analysis focusing solely on endophora, which normally involve only intratextual relations. This is because endophora concerns reference to the verbal context, in simpler terms, the text itself. On the other hand, exophora concerns reference to the non-verbal context outside the text itself. As you can see in example 1, the sun is hot, is starting to burn me. The nominal group the sun can be interpreted as exophoric or homophoric, while its subsequent mention as realized by the determinative pronoun it can be interpreted as either exophoric or homophoric plus anaphoric. When the analysis focuses solely on anaphora, mainly to do with meaning relations within the text, there will be biasness, whereby meaning relations to do with the non-verbal context outside the text itself. In this case, exophora and homophora will fall off the radar. For your better understanding towards the exophora framework, I am going to present to you the English person categories. The English person categories comprise three main distinctions, catering to different speech roles, I, you, and we. Other roles, he, she, it, they, and we, and the generalized one. In this figure, we can see the typical linguistic realizations of exophora, like the first person interlocutor pronouns I and we, and also the second person interlocutor pronoun you. This is the research design of our study. Stage 1 is internet search for suitable mental health memoirs using relevant keywords such as depression, mental illness, mental disorder, memoir, autobiography, diary, psychiatrist, clinical psychologist, counselor, and others. Stage 2 is selection of 2 chapters containing the wrong discourse in the greatest density from each memoir after intensive reading. Stage 3 is transcriptions for the selected 2 chapters from each memoir in Microsoft Word. Stage 4 is the main part of this study, the referential cohesion analysis. The research questions 1 for the current study is what are the exophoric references used as cohesive ties in the constructions of the wrong discourse in the mental health memoirs. The interlocutor determinative pronouns that I, you, and we are the exophoric references used as cohesive ties in the constructions of the wrong discourse in the mental health memoirs. The research question 2 of the current study is how are the exophoric references used for expressing personal recovery experiences as portrayed by the shaping of narrative identities. The findings show 3 emergent functions of exophoric references. First, the sharing of perspective via the writer's assimilation into various social groups. Second, the generalization via a sense of commonness among various social groups. Third, the cultivation of personalized connections via a sense of close proximity among various social groups. The wrong discourse will come with these emergent functions of exophoric references contribute to the discursive resources in the mental health community. People can draw upon these wrong discourse in articulating personal recovery for collective healing during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now let's look at the findings for answering research questions 1. Extract 1 is about the writer Lori Golub recreating her conversation with her therapist Wendell. Let's read the extract. Wendell once pointed out that we talk to ourselves more than we would talk to any other person over the course of our life, but that our words aren't always kind or true or helpful or even respectful. From this extract, we can observe that the first person interlocutor pronoun we is used for the identification of the writer as part of the patient group at large. Now is the time for answering research question 2. As partly illustrated in extract 1, the key finding 1 of this study is the sharing of perspective via the writer's assimilation. As this figure shows, the 3 small circles each represent the writer, while the 3 big circles represent the patient group, the mental health therapist group, people at large, respectively. The writer, as realized by the interlocutor pronoun I, we, or you, is seen as assimilating into each social group for the sharing of perspective. Now let's look at the findings for answering research question 1. Extract 2 is about the writer, Irvin David Yalom, recreating the time when one member of the therapy group led by him shared the experience of learning and growing from the confrontation with death. Let's read the extract. As one of them put it, "What a pity I had to wait until now, until my body was riddled with cancer to learn how to live." From this extract, we can observe that the singular first-person interlocutor pronoun I is used for the identification of the members in the therapy group as any person in general. Let's read the last part. It brings home the realization that since we have only one chance at life, we should live it fully and end it with the fewest regrets possible. Here we can see that the plural first person interlocutor pronoun we is used for the identification of the writer as part of people at large. As partly illustrated in Extract 2, the key finding 2 of this study for answering research question 2 is the generalization where a sense of commonness. As this figure shows, the small circle represents mental health therapies at large as realized by V and I. The medium-sized circle represents patients at large as realized by I, which also embodies the small circle. The large circle represents people at large as realized by V and I, which also embodies the medium-sized circle. Now let's look at the findings for answering research question 1. Extract 3 is about the writer Lori Gottlieb reflecting upon her clinical practice, in which she was just there to guide the patient, whereby in fact the patient was the one who should put in effort by first turning up for therapy. Let's read the extract. It's all you, we tend to say. I'm just here to guide you. From this extract, we can observe that the second person interlocutor pronoun you is used for the identification of any reader in general as part of the patient group at large. As partly illustrated in Extract 3, the key finding 3 of this study for answering research question 2 is the cultivation of personalized connections where a sense of close proximity. As this figure shows, the 3 small circles each represent either the writer or any reader in general. The first 2 big circles each represent the reader group and people at large respectively as realized by V. These 2 big circles each envelop the small circle which represents the writer. Besides, the third big circle represents the patient group as realized by U. This big circle envelops the small circle which represents any reader in general. Overall, the strategic use of exophorus help in weaving patterns of meaning inherent in the experiential content of the Ron discourse, which are best captured by the concept of inclusivity. As presently shown, the concept of inclusivity encompasses the sharing of perspective, where one's assimilation into a larger social group, generalization among a particular social group where a sense of commonness, and lastly, the cultivation of personalized connections among a particular social group where a sense of close proximity. The Ron discourse is recently promulgated, albeit Western-centric. All the writers of the memoirs from which the Ron discourse was sourced are Western medical practitioners. The findings of the current study are certainly culture-bound, with more tilts towards Western culture. Careful consideration is warranted when it comes to applying the current study implications on other mental health communities. As brought to the fore by John, a mental health literate society is well needed in consideration of the high prevalence of mental disorders to be attended to by professionals and the greater gains from prevention, early intervention, self-help, and support of others in the community. As the current study suggests, a culture of inclusivity is called for in the delivery of mental health care during this COVID-19 pandemic, whereby people encountering increasing mental health challenges. In conclusion, the deep-rooted linguistic intricacies inherent in the Ron discourse under the spotlight of the current study advance our human understanding towards the role of language in evolving to serve our different purposes in terms of mental health functioning. Thank you. Thank you.